got your ass kicked.
Don't be conservative. Tell me I got my ass kicked.
You
that's
did.
What I want to hear.
42 points.
I'm
Do I need to say anything else?
What happened in this game? I don't think Draymond should have been suspended at all.
Are you out of your damn mind? You are out of your damn mind.
Hey, Josh, can you smell?
Really?
Back to SmackDown.
And completely stolen Cody Rhodes' WrestleMania moment. This is total. No, you don't get to talk right now.
Oh, really?
No.
You don't get to talk.
No.
I am projecting. That's what I do in the media. You guys are afraid to put your freaking takes out there. Yes, that's what I'm doing.
You, again, just
you know how sports media works? This is my job. And indeed, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. It's been a while. Brandon Lewis, host of Brandon's World. I'll go to the Max, host of the Sports Room Talk Show. This is Championship Rings. It is Election Day in the United States of America. It's also NFL Trade Deadline Day. We got that. We got a little baseball to talk about as a World Series champion has been crowned, college football, NBA, and more. Josh, after a few weeks off, welcome back to Championship Rings.
Yeah, I know. The timing, I don't know how we could have timed this out any better, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I cannot wait. Tonight's going to be a massive show for us. As always, subscribe to the Championship Rings YouTube channel at Championship Ring 216. Follow us on X at Ring Champion, Instagram at Ring Champion, Facebook Ring Champion 216. We're starting off tonight's show by discussing the NFL trade deadline. Not only did it wrap up today at 4 p.m. Eastern time, but of course we had some deals go down the last time we were on the air with you. Amari Cooper going to Buffalo, DeAndre Hopkins going to Kansas City, as well as, of course, the two big ones today. Marshawn Lattimore going from New Orleans to Washington, Zadarius Smith going from Cleveland to Detroit. Josh, biggest takeaway from all this movement in the NFL over the last couple of weeks?
Detroit saw a need and they filled it. Because they didn't want to pay too steep of a price for Myles Garrett. They didn't want to pay a steep price for Max Crosby because if you were wanting to get either one of them, you were going to have to pay with a couple ones and maybe a two in there. So going and getting Zadarius Smith, is he the caliber of Aiden Hutchinson? No, but I think he still fills that hole and just strengthens Detroit's hold on the NFC as a whole.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the Lions a little later in the show. I actually think the best move of the entire deadline was what the Kansas City Chiefs kicked off the entire couple weeks worth with, which was DeAndre Hopkins moving from Tennessee to Kansas City. I cannot think of a bigger upgrade for a player than DeAndre Hopkins going from Will Levis and that offensive line in Tennessee to Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs. You already have seen the impact he's had on them only 2 games in. There was a lot of people that thought, DeAndre Hopkins had looked washed the last couple of years in Arizona and Tennessee. That, to me, right now is clearly being defunct. I also think, and we're going to talk about this in the next segment, the Saints are a dumpster fire. And so for Washington to go out, and it's the one need that I think we both agreed with that clearly needed, which was a bona fide number 1 stud corner on that secondary. I think they clearly feel like them and Philadelphia right there in the NFC East. And, Washington's not waiting around. I had predicted them to be the Houston Texans of this year, and I think that's what we're looking at.
I think let me say it like this. Philadelphia is going to keep it close, but I think Washington's ultimately going to win that division. I still think Philadelphia gets in as a wild card, though, which will be very interesting to see who they have to go on the road and face. But that aside, you know who's happiest about this Marshawn Lattimore trade? Mike
Mike Evans.
Evans.
Yes, he
It,
is. Of course, when he does come back from Tampa, and Tampa, they unfortunately lost Chris Godwin the last play of the game against Baltimore, and then losing Evans in the same game has hurt them. Obviously, they started the year 4-2. They fell off and have lost three straight now. But back to the trade deadline itself, there was a lot of speculation that this year could be a crazy year because there's a lot of bad teams in the NFL this year. And teams didn't sell, I think, as much maybe some people thought they would. The one trade for the life of me, I don't understand. I'm not just saying this as an NFC East and obviously a Cowboy hater as it
I
is
know exactly what trade you're going
as
to,
it
and
is.
I'm just as dumbfounded as you are.
I
Like,
mean, to give up a fourth round pick for a receiver that can't separate, I mean, I don't get it. Detroit, gave
eh,
up West against Zadarius Smith. So I mean, you tell me. If I'm Carolina, I'm like, of course I'm taking that deal. But yeah, I don't know. But bottom line, I think is this trade deadline wasn't as crazy as people think. Maybe an underrated move that happened right before the deadline is Tre'Davious White going from the Rams to Baltimore to help boost that secondary.
what about Mike Williams going from the Jets to the Steelers? That could be a
It
very sneaky move.
it could be. I still don't believe in Pittsburgh. I know they're 6-2, but listen, we said this, or actually I said it, and I think you agreed, or I don't remember exactly how the conversation went, but I remember saying specifically when we did our NFL predictions in August that Pittsburgh was probably going to start the year 6-2, 6-3, and finish the year 9-8, and I'm still at that point. I think that their hardest games are ahead of them. I don't believe that Russ is all of a sudden back, and this team is going to be a Super Bowl winning team. Preston Smith could help them, I guess, add some depth a little more on the defense side of the ball. But Mike Williams has also had a history of being injured, and Pittsburgh does not throw the ball down the field regardless. So I don't know how much that Mike Williams trade is going to impact them.
They might be more inclined to throw the ball more now that they have George Pickens on one side and Mike Williams on the other side. We'll see. But what about the trade Cincinnati made getting Khalil Herbert from the Chicago Bears?
Well, for starters, I don't even want to talk about the Bears. They make my head
Yeah,
hurt.
you want
Um,
you sure you don't want to talk about that?
I do because Matt Eberflus needs to be fired immediately. We weren't on the air last week because I had some personal things I had to take care of. But my God, I nearly had a heart attack watching that Hail Mary. And trying to figure out what the hell the Chicago Bears are doing and why Tyreek Stevenson still has a job. But to answer your question about the trade, Herbert is a nice running back, and I may be the only person in the world that thinks this, but I don't think Cincinnati's out of the realm for a wild card spot. And if they knock off Baltimore this Thursday, big ask. But if they do that, if they go into Baltimore and they beat Baltimore on Thursday night, I still think the Bengals are in line to win this division.
Ew. I mean, their game against the Chargers next week got flexed into Sunday Night
Yes, it
Football.
did.
Um, which
Hey,
means the
listen,
charge,
Joe
which
Burrow threw
means
5 touchdown passes this past week and didn't throw one to Jamar Chase. Tell me how
yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah, it doesn't. But you're asking them to go into Baltimore on Thursday night. I don't see that happening.
I think
Not
I listen. I think I got maybe two of the top four quarterbacks in the conference. Cincinnati had them. Now, granted, it was in Cincinnati, but they had them. I think Baltimore made some, plays that Lamar Jackson made special plays. Baltimore obviously creamed Denver on Sunday, but I think they had a bad taste in their mouth from losing to Cleveland. And again, to me, that's just it's any given Sunday. And I've been saying this now for the past few weeks, Josh. You take a look at this league now, and we're seeing it at the trade deadline. Most teams, Kansas City, Buffalo, they went for it. They bolstered up. Washington, they bolstered up. We're at the point where, okay, we may get an upset week to week here or there, like New England upsetting the Jets or, Carolina upsetting New Orleans. But in retrospect, the week always usually comes right back to reality, and we are starting to see the best teams in the NFL separate from themselves.
I mean, I will say this as a Browns fan, I was expecting Denzel Ward to be traded. I thought Greg Newsome would be traded. There was speculation David Njoku might be traded.
They're not going to sell the farm. You don't do. You know what? I'm trying to think of an NFL team, maybe outside of Carolina, has ever just sold at the deadline. Washington did to an extent. Remember, they got rid of Sweat, and then they got rid of the other pass rusher, Chase Young,
Chase Young, yeah.
um, last year at the deadline. But I don't remember a team flat out giving up on, like you would allude to, 3 or 4 players. Amari Cooper and Zadarius Smith were both veterans. Amari was obviously in that contract dispute. Zadarius Smith was probably not coming back next year. So that makes it easier to unload as opposed to young guys, Greg Newsome, Denzel Ward, and even Myles Garrett's name was thrown out there.
Yeah, I thought he might be the one getting traded to Detroit. But again, I understand why the Lions chose Zadarius Smith instead in this case.
Yeah, I just think like Zadarius is a nice player, and by the way, if he's there next year as well, I think he'll fit right in with Hutchinson. I just for me, the DeAndre Hopkins move, I think I know where Kansas City's first loss is going to be, but there's not going to be a lot of losses.
No. I'm thinking their first loss is going to be in Orchard Park against the Buffalo Bills.
You and I are on the same page on that.
Okay. Really, it should have been last night, but, well, one, because the right tackle for Kansas City should have been called for a false start, but, the refs love Kansas City, so there's that. And, well, Todd Bowles should have gone for 2 instead of kicking the extra point. But that's neither here nor there because we didn't put that in the rundown for some odd reason. I don't know. But I'm actually surprised in that regard because Tampa is still right there. Sure, it looks like Atlanta's going to win the division, but Tampa is still in the mix for a wild card spot.
Well, I mean, if they lose to San Francisco Sunday, they're 4-6.
Okay. Which I think they can beat San Francisco. It's at home in Tampa. San Francisco's having to come cross country. Like, I think that's a winnable game for Tampa, even though they
off a bye week though for San Francisco.
Yeah.
And also now Tampa Bay on a short week playing on Monday night.
It's gonna be a tough ask, but I wouldn't just dismiss Tampa. I wouldn't do that.
I'm not dismissing them. I'm just saying I think they're a good team. I just think the Mike Evans and Chris Godwin injuries kind of dampened their season.
Which is why, getting back to what I was going to say as my original point, I'm surprised they didn't trade for a wide receiver today. I thought they would be the ones to, okay, maybe not trade with Carolina because you don't usually see in trades within your own division, but maybe go out and see if you could have gotten a Mike Williams from the Jets or somebody,
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of names out there. Again, I think my problem with Mike Williams is he's never healthy.
I'm just using him as an example in this case.
And that's one of the reasons why I think Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers moved off him. And by the way, for all the talk, the Chargers don't have weapons. They sure had weapons on Sunday. That's all I have to say.
Yeah. But no, my bigger point, though, was not specifically that Tampa needed to trade for Mike Williams, but given that they lost Mike Evans for a few weeks anyway, and Chris Godwin for the rest of the season, I would have thought they would trade for a wide receiver.
So let's talk because we both had predicted that Dennis Allen would be the first head coach fired, and he was the second head coach fired because the Jets went off the rails and fired Robert Saleh for whatever reason I still can't figure out. But Josh, after week 2, the Saints were 2-0, and they were literally the talk of the NFL.
Yeah,
Then
you and I were talking about it, like, did we get this NFC South wrong?
Then my Philadelphia Eagles went into New Orleans, and on a fourth down, Jalen Hurts hit Dallas Goddard on a massive crossing route down the field for about 60 yards to set them up for the game-winning touchdown. At that point, that was the difference between maybe Philadelphia being 1-2 and their season potentially teetering after that Saquon Barkley drop against the Falcons, and the Saints being 3-0 to all of a sudden Philadelphia 6-2. The Saints have not won a game. Their roster's a mess. Michael Thomas, who doesn't even play for them anymore, is calling out Derek Carr. The coach is fired. And this is exactly why I predicted the Panthers to be better than the Saints this year, because this is exactly the Saints team I thought we would get.
Both of these teams, the Panthers and the Saints, are total dumpster fires.
So is the team on the screen as well, Vegas. I'll get to them in a minute.
Oh, don't even get me started with the Raiders. I still have no idea how the Browns lost to them in week 4, but that's a different story for another day. But I still remember you and I, following that Cowboys game, you and I both came on here and were like, did we get this NFC South wrong? Like, are the Saints actually going to be a factor? And they've just, like, fallen flat on their face since. So, I don't know. I don't know what to make of the game next week because the Browns play the Saints in New Orleans. That's going to be two bad teams playing each other.
Remember coming into the year when I asked you what exactly the Saints are?
Yes.
I still don't know what they are. They are an old team with bad roster management, somewhat talented defense. You know, Demario Davis is still there. Chase Young is still there. Cam Jordan is still there. Alvin Kamara, I thought if there was a big splashy move, if a team wanted to go out and get a running back today, maybe Alvin Kamara would be a guy that you could target because there's workload there in New Orleans. Because, you know, Chris Olave basically went to the hospital because of Derek Carr on Sunday. So now,
or at least that's what Michael Thomas is claiming.
I mean, he pretty much did. That hit was brutal. And so now Alvin Kamara is their only offensive piece. Jake Hanger, or whatever the hell his name is, at quarterback ain't the answer. Spencer Rattler looked like he belonged back in college. And by the way, this team is $80 million over the cap. And so if there was a team worse off than the Cleveland Browns in cap hell, it's the New Orleans Saints. There is no out from this team besides in my opinion, a complete, I'm going to go a little baseball here, Chicago White Sox-esque teardown. I think this team needs a complete, and in the NFL, you can do it quicker. We've seen teams hit on draft picks and hit on players. You got to get a quarterback and you got to get a coach. This team right now, because of their cap situation, they can't really move off players for the next 2 or 3 years. They're a mess. I mean, I don't know anybody who would want this job right now.
Yeah. Like, who knows what other vacancies are going to be open?
Chicago, please, especially if they lose to New England on Sunday, that vacancy will be open Monday morning at 6 a.m. Eastern time, because I am ready to fire Matt Eberflus. And my one reservation on the Bears this year was their coaching. And, well, you know, DJ Moore walking off the field in the middle of a freaking play.
So there's probably going to be at least 3 openings: the Jets, the Bears, and the Saints. Maybe the Giants. We'll see what happens there with Brian Daboll, but I'm going to say it.
Let me ask you, speaking of openings, there's 2. So, I mean, we all know Carolina, right? Dave Temper's a madman. Would they get rid of Dave Canales after 1 year? I don't know. I feel bad for him. And I do think the one bad team that we have to watch is the one that's close to us in Cleveland. what does happen with Kevin Stefanski and what does happen with General Manager Andrew Berry, because I don't freaking know. I can't tell you the answer right now.
The Haslams have so much egg on their face right now, you can't even see their faces. It is ridiculous. Stay out of football operations at Jimmy and D.
Well,
Haslam.
well,
Stay
clearly
out.
Haslam should stay out of basketball operations too, if you get what I'm saying.
Yes. Because think about this for a second. The Haslams also own the Columbus Crew. They just got eliminated by the New York Red Bulls, but the the Crew have won 2 MLS Cups in last season and in 2020, if I'm not mistaken. So, hey, they're owned by the Haslams, and they've won championships because the Haslams are actually staying away. They're not getting involved. Like, we were having success in 2014 with Brian Hoyer as our quarterback, Mike Penn as our head coach. I think it was Shanahan as our offensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
What happened? The Haslams got involved and said, no, we want to see Johnny Manziel on the field. What happens? We get embarrassed by the Cincinnati Bengals like 30-0. Stay out of football operations, Jimmy and D Haslam. We will be so much better off without you.
So I want to address real quick the Raiders side of things because North Turner came out of nowhere. Did not expect that name to show up on my timeline today. That he is back as a senior offensive assistant. Obviously, his son Scott now is going to be the interim offensive coordinator. They get rid of Luke Getzey. We all know him as the Bears OC last year. But this team has no identity. I said it going into the year. I want to go out of their pieces. Didn't love their quarterback at all. Now they lose Devontae Adams. So they need to replace that production. I still think Brock Bowers is a very good tight end. You know, Josh, I know everybody wanted Antonio Pierce to get that job, but I could see a scenario, speaking of firings here. What if the Raiders take a big swing here? And I don't know if you know where I'm going with this, but Sanders times two, Dion Shador, Las Vegas, 2025 in the National Football League.
The Raiders would have to get the number 1 pick probably for that to happen. Unless, like, whoever ends up with the first overall pick doesn't go with Shador.
Right now, I mean, off the top of my head, if you take a look at the NFL standings, I know New England has 1 win. I think they are the only 1-win team now in the league with Carolina's win. Or no, New England does have 2 wins. I apologize.
Yes.
So you take a look at teams. Does the worst team in the league has 2 wins? Correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
So everybody is bottomed up. So it is a real possibility, I think, for the Raiders to just get that number 1 pick.
They could. But do you? I get that Shador is going to be there, but do you pass up Quinn Ewers? Do you pass up Cam Ward?
I'll tell you what. I read a report the other day that Quinn Ewers is a 3rd-round pick.
Okay.
I don't. It sounds like a lot of these scouts are down on these quarterbacks. It sounds like Shador Sanders is like clear number 1. Some people think Cam Ward may not even go in the top 10, from what I've been reading. Again, this is all going to change. So.
Oh yeah. But just to go back on the Saints super quick, think about this. Derek Carr was the quarterback for the Raiders. What happened? Dennis Allen got fired. Derek Carr was the quarterback in New Orleans. What happened? Dennis Allen got fired. Coincidence? I think not.
We go from trash teams to great players. As we are now going to unveil, I'll let Josh go first on this one, who we think is our midway for the NFL season. Week 9 has just ended. Of course, there's 17 weeks, so do the math if you will. But for this point in the season, it's been a weird NFL year where you could argue not a lot of people have separated from the pack. I think there's definitely candidates in there. I don't know if there's one clearly above the rest right now. We're about to debate it. But Josh, who's your midseason NFL MVP?
You could make an argument for a lot of players. Most of them are quarterbacks. But just to change things up, I'm going to go with somebody who's not a quarterback. I'm going to the skill positions. I predicted this guy to win Offensive Player of the Year during our prediction show, and if he were to win MVP somehow, I don't think a lot of people would necessarily disagree with it. From the Detroit Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Because you think about it, Jerry Goff, when he throws that ball, most of the time, where's it going? Amon-Ra. I mean,
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, it has been, but they have a lot of weapons. I mean, they use Gibbs in the passing game, Laporta, Wright, Jamison Williams, who just came back from suspension. Yes, Brown is that number one target, but there are games this year where he's had 2 or 3 catches a game.
yes, but when he makes those 2 or 3 catches, they're usually in big spots, are they not?
And it depends. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I would not say all the time no.
Okay, most of the time. Is that fair? To,
Yes.
okay. Um, so just because I like to change things up and not go with a quarterback necessarily, I'm gonna go with Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Well, I think if there is a non-quarterback on the list, I actually think it would be Derrick Henry from Baltimore. And to be honest with you, I think the Lions' offensive line, Jameer Gibbs, Dave Montgomery, I think they are all more valuable than Amon-Ra St. Brown right now. Because I think that Detroit offense goes through their running game. And that's why they're having such success with Jared Goff on play action passes and why Goff has more touchdown passes from than incompletions during the last 6 weeks.
I, I think I heard this stat correctly, so don't quote me on this, but I think I heard that when Jerry Goff has thrown a pass to Amon-Ra St. Brown, he does not have an incompletion since like week 3, I believe it is.
Well, that's probably true. I mean, you could say the same thing almost about Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers, what they have done. And speaking of number 8, that is my midseason MVP. I just think, outside and really the game against Cleveland, they had a shot to win. The ball, it's Bateman in the hands. And really a game they should have won. Jameis throws the ball right to Kyle Hamilton, drops the ball, or that would have been game over. Obviously, the next
That
play,
was Jim Donovan doing that.
yeah, it
Sure.
was. Then rest in peace to the great Jim Donovan. Cedric Tillman, the next play, gets the touchdown. But I think week 2 against Vegas, which somehow again they lost to Vegas. If you want to blame that more on the defense, you can. I think that was Lamar's worst game of the year. I thought he played pretty well head to head with Patrick Mahomes week 1. I thought he dominated Josh Allen in week 4 when Josh Allen obviously was the leader of the MVP in that category. Um, you know, I actually think right now you can make a really strong case for Commanders quarterback Jaden Daniels, even as a rookie. At
What about Lions QB Jared Goff?
The problem with Goff is he doesn't have great numbers, and the MVP is a numbers stat. Like he's throwing for 100 yards a game. Like I agree with you how well Jared Goff's playing, but I've always said, and this is why I don't love the MVP award because I truly don't think it's the most valuable player. Like if we're talking most valuable player, I honestly think it's probably Patrick Mahomes, night and day, 365 days a year. I think it's more of a stat award. And this year, Mahomes, until last night, had more interceptions this year than touchdowns. But we all think he's the best quarterback in football.
Yeah, he hasn't been really delivering well on fantasy. I was going back and forth this week. Do I start Bo Nix or do I start Patrick Mahomes? Ultimately, I decided on Patrick Mahomes because
and you definitely made the right decision. That was a bad spot for Denver. Baltimore coming out that bad loss to Cleveland. You knew they were going to be angry. I don't take away anything from Denver there, by the way, just for the record. In the NFL, I talk about this a lot, I think more than you do. It's not who you play, it's when you play teams, right? It's spots.
It's a bit. I think it's a bit of both, really.
I don't. I really think it comes down to when you play teams. The day matters. We just talked about Thursday Night Football, Cincinnati, Baltimore. I do think that matters. The day matters. Your injury report matters. What you did in your last game absolutely does matter because you only play one game a week. It's not basketball or baseball where you're playing either every other day or every day. So
I'm not disagreeing with that, but we thought Denver was this great team and all that, but they had just
I
beaten.
never thought Denver was a great team.
Okay, I'm not saying when I say we, I'm not saying us specifically. Like people were starting to talk about, oh, are the Broncos like legit? Not necessarily like
But that's
super.
not a great team. You know what I call great? Kansas City and Detroit. That's great.
Okay,
I think everybody else is good. There's very good. I think there's Washington. I would put Philly in very good. I'd probably put Atlanta in very good.
okay,
Buffalo in very good.
okay. I get what you're saying, but like people were starting to talk about Denver in a little bit of a higher regard. Would you agree with?
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. But again, I thought in that spot, and again, hindsight's 2020, I should have bet it. I thought there was a chance Baltimore could do 41-10 on them.
But my
Because
but my point though is a lot of that conversation about hey, maybe Denver's better than we thought is because of who they just played, right? New Orleans and
no, it's not. It's because they beat up on bad teams and because Bo Nix is a good
exactly.
quarterback.
Right.
But it's not. I mean, I told you before the year Denver was going to win 8 games. I told you they're over under 5.5 was the easiest bet on the board.
I also had the Broncos making the playoffs if you remember.
You did. I think you're just missing the point. That I'm not saying Denver's a bad team. I'm just saying I think Baltimore just showed that they are above a class. I think Lamar Jackson again is probably at this point, unless he has another bad game, he's on his way to winning his third MVP and his second back to back.
So
The
I
only thing that I do think will change, can I say this? I don't care what his stats are. If the Chiefs go undefeated, Patrick Mahomes is your MVP. And there will
yeah,
be no argument from me.
yeah. The only game I could see the Chiefs losing right now, well no, there's two games I could see them losing. At Buffalo and I could see them losing at Denver. Those are the only two games.
I could too. I also think, depending on what happens down the stretch, if they have games already locked up, maybe in at Pittsburgh or at home, even against Houston, like if their seating is already locked up, do you rest guys like Indianapolis did? Remember, they were 14-0. They tanked the last 2 games in the 2009 season.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, let's talk best team in football because I think there are clearly, as I said, the two best teams in football, one in the AFC, one in the NFC. There is this debate out there because while the Kansas City Chiefs are undefeated and the Detroit Lions have a loss, you can make an argument the Detroit Lions are the most complete team in football. Josh, do you buy that sentiment?
I mean, I would because I like Detroit's offense a little more than I like Kansas City's offense. You look at Detroit's offense, I I specifically look at again their skill position groups. When comparing the two, like I don't know if I can trust Kansas City's wide receiving core. I know they have Travis Kelsey. I know they just got DeAndre Hopkins. Excuse me. But then I look over at Detroit. I'm like, you got David Montgomery, you got Jameer Gibbs, you got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Jamison Williams. That's a lot surrounding Jared Goff. And again, you look at Kansas City. They yes, they have Kareem Hunt. They're gonna get Isaiah Pacheco back at some point. We'll see if Juju comes back, or he might already be back. I don't remember.
And by the way, Rashid Rice, I don't know. There hasn't been really an official word on if he could come back for a potential playoff run.
Right. So because I have that question mark over Kansas City in terms of their skill position group, I would favor Detroit. But it's really a coin flip right now, which I'm sure Bills fans don't want to hear that term, coin flip.
I don't think Buffalo is even the third best team. I think it's probably Baltimore. I would put Baltimore over Buffalo, especially because Baltimore hammered them head to head in Week 4. When it comes to these two teams, I think that they are the class of the NFL. There's a reason why I picked them both to meet in the Super Bowl. I think it comes down to who would you pick at a Super Bowl right now today? If this is our Super Bowl matchup, who would you pick to win the game? And I'm sorry, Detroit, and I'm sorry to our friend Jalen Sandvik. I love you, and I was thoroughly impressed by what you did going to Green Bay in a rainstorm in your first outdoor game of the year and pretty much dismantling the Packers. I don't care what the final score said. That game was really competitive from the second quarter on. But if I have Patrick Mahomes and I have Andy Reid and I have Travis Kelsey and I have that defense, who, again, the stat has continued, they have not given up more than 28 points since Super Bowl 57 against my Philadelphia Eagles, which is an amazing stat to me. And that's, by the way, after losing players like a L'Jarius Sneed to Tennessee in the offseason. I just, I don't know. Like, I think Kansas City will have a hiccup here and there, like we've been talking about, potentially at Buffalo, maybe at Denver, somewhere along the lines. But I can't pick against them. Like, I just can't. I've seen the Lions sometimes get a little bit away from their past game. We saw them, against Tampa Bay lose that game. We saw a very close game against Seattle where, if it wasn't for some big plays, maybe they lose that game at home to a team that seems to have their number. But Sunday was impressive for Detroit. And to me, like you said, maybe Bills fans don't want to hear it. Maybe Bucks fans don't want to hear it after last night. But I think it's a coin flip.
Yeah. If I had to pick the second best team in the NFC right now, I would probably go with the Washington Commanders.
See, and this is where, and I completely understand where you're coming from. To be honest with you, I think it's my team. I think it's Philadelphia. I know people don't trust the coach, which I get. Whatever. I don't understand why people hate on Sirianni. To me, Sirianni and Dan Campbell are the same coach. I literally don't see a difference. That's just me. I think this Philly team, you have asked me for the past, 6 months, is the real Jalen Hurts going to show up? Which Jalen Hurts is going to show up? Well, that Jalen Hurts hasn't turned the ball over since week 4. Saquon Barkley has been an absolute monster.
And he did a reverse hurdle.
And he did that. And by the way, yes, Washington got Marshawn Lattimore. And yes, their defense is better. But has anybody paid attention to my defense and what we've been doing the last 4 weeks since the bye? My defense is getting better by the snap. And this team, listen, I know somehow we made that game against Jacksonville close. I get it. Saquon Barkley fumble. Was it a fumble? Was it not? I have no freaking idea. It seemed to change the game. But I think the Eagles have the second best offensive line next to Detroit in the conference. I think they have as equal skill positions as Detroit. And I think talent-wise, they are right there.
Okay, let me say this. When I say Washington is the second best team, I don't think it's by a wide margin between them and Philly. But I trust Jaden Daniels a little bit more than Jalen Hurts right now.
Next week we will see. I mean, next week is arguably the biggest game of the week. It's Thursday night. Commanders at Eagles.
Yes. By the way, is there any chance we could sub out that Giants Cowboys Thanksgiving game for Commanders Eagles? Please.
Well. By the way, that's not a Thanksgiving game. I don't know where you got that from. Eagles Commanders is week 11 and then week 16.
No, what I'm saying is Giants Cowboys is on Thanksgiving. I'm saying, can we trade that out?
I wish, but no.
That's what I'm saying.
That's not the case. I wish they could flex Thanksgiving games, and they're not going to. That's going to be, oh God, Cooper Rush against Daniel Jones. Lord help us all. I think everybody's going to be at the kitchen table eating turkey anyway. Thank freaking God.
Yeah. Let me just say this. Looking at the Thanksgiving slate of games, the only good one is going to be Bears-Lions. Otherwise, don't.
I mean, is it even going to be good at this point? If Chicago loses to New England, it's man overboard. I don't even trust them. They should beat the hell out of New England. By the way, Drake May has looked better than Caleb Williams. I don't even know where to start. Josh has got me all going on the Chicago Bears. I'm not even a Chicago Bears fan, and they have me so rattled I can't even think. God,
Uh,
I can only imagine being a fan of that sad sack of a franchise. All right, let's get to our Week 10 best games because, in my opinion, Josh, this is a rare week in the National Football League where I think the five best games are the five best games. And I really, I'll debate you if you have a different game, but I think my order, to be honest with you, maybe you could talk me into flipping a game or two, but I think this order is pretty as accurate as can be.
okay, go.
Number five. This game would have been way up on the list if the injury to Dak Prescott did not happen on Sunday, but it did. And now we have Cooper Rush. It's still Eagles Cowboys. I think the Cowboys season's over. It should be over, but you never know. Philly and Dallas are arch rivals. Obviously, it's a massive rivalry game, and Philadelphia needs to keep pace with Washington. So I will put that there at number five. At number four, I have the Sunday night game between Jared Goff and the Motor City Dan Campbell Detroit Lions that we just talked about. They're going to Houston to take on a, dare I say, struggling, even at 6-3, Houston Texans team who has not looked the same since Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs went down. At number three, I have Russell Wilson with his new toy and Mike Williams in Pittsburgh. He takes on Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. This is a stretch of the Pittsburgh Steelers' hardest part of their schedule. I don't care what Steelers fans say about the Browns. The Browns will play well against Pittsburgh because, again, that's a divisional game. Pittsburgh still has all 6 divisional games in play. Washington, again, needs to keep pace with the Philadelphia Eagles with that huge Week 11 NFC East game incoming. At number 2, we just talked about this game a little bit earlier. San Francisco coming off a bye. They're going to Tampa. Big game for both of these teams. Bigger for Tampa because the NFC West is all jumbled up. Arizona and the Rams are sort of hanging around 500 right now. So is Seattle and San Francisco, obviously. Tampa, if they lose this week, and Atlanta might be on a bye, but if Tampa loses this week, then they could pretty much kiss the NFC South goodbye. And at 4-6, they're trying to get a wild card spot. And then
Atlanta's at New Orleans.
Okay, so Atlanta's at New Orleans. A tricky game for Atlanta because you got the interim head coach coming in there. Saints and Falcons are arch rivals. But again, if Atlanta wins that and Tampa Bay loses, you can kiss the NFC South goodbye. And then my number one game of the week is Thursday night, Cincinnati at Baltimore. I think this is a huge flip game from the Cincinnati perspective because if they lose this game, not only are they 3 games behind the Ravens, but they would be 4 games behind the Ravens in the AFC North because of the head-to-head tiebreaker. Lamar Jackson would all but extend his MVP conversation. Cincinnati would be looking to, try to fight for a wild card spot. If the Bengals win Thursday night in Baltimore, that lead for Baltimore goes down to 1 game. They would split the head-to-head, and Cincinnati has an easier schedule down the stretch. And again, who knows? They're going to battle each other out. They still have to play Pittsburgh twice, and Cleveland's in there. But I do think if the Bengals want to get their season back on track after a horrific start, Thursday night will go a long way. And I cannot wait to see because every time those 2 teams play, it's a really good game.
Yeah. For the most part, our lists are the same. The only game that is different, I couldn't put Eagles Cowboys on the list just because Dak is out and it feels like the Cowboys season has gone down the drain already. So that takes a lot of that interest and excitement out of it for me. I'm actually going to put the Monday night football game in at number 5, Dolphins Rams. The Rams seem to be getting a little bit healthier now. Miami, offensively anyway, seems to be finding their footing with Tua. This could be a pivotal game for both of these teams in terms of can the Dolphins get back into a wild card spot because they're not catching the Bills.
See, I disagree. I think Miami's season's over. I I actually because I took a look at their schedule. You already mentioned Green Bay on Thanksgiving. They have to go to Green Bay. I'm not picking them to win that game. They still have to go to Cleveland. Again, it's Cleveland, but it's outdoors in Miami. They still got to go to the Jets. It's outdoors. It's Miami. And their defense is not good. And Tua played a good second half against Buffalo, but that first half was not very good. And I just think Miami's season went down the tube when Tua got injured, and I think they're too far back, even in the wild card pictures, with Pittsburgh's record already, with Cincinnati, who I think will get on a roll here,
With the Chargers and the
with the Chargers
Broncos.
in Denver. Like, I think their season's over. Where I think Dallas, like that's a divisional game. No matter what against Philly, they're going to play their asses off. Philly needs to win that game to keep pace with Washington. Or even if the Rams lose, like I said, I think the Rams are still in position now that they got their players back. They've won 3 in a row. They can afford a loss even to Miami, and I think could still sneak into that NFC wildcard spot, which I think is thinning out a little bit at the bottom.
Yeah, but like I don't think you can totally dismiss the Dolphins, though you make a valid argument as to in favor of dismissing them. I get that. But again, they showed flashes of what their offense can be when fully healthy. They're playing in LA. SoFi is a dome stadium, essentially. The Rams are trying to turn things around. It looks like they're getting healthier. That was a big win for them, by the way, in Seattle.
By the way, Mike McDonald kicked the field goal. Oh my god. And I had the Rams -1, so I was celebrating, but my god, what are we doing? Again, people say Nick. Again, I hear all this criticism of Nick Sirianni, and he's this, he's that. Why is nobody talking about Mike McDonald? He went for it on 4th and 1 in 2020 in overtime. I don't care if it's a 4th and 1. I am usually a go for it guy. Not in overtime when you can almost guarantee yourself to take the lead. Oh my god.
Okay, so I have Dolphins Rams at 5. At number 4, I've got Lions Texans. I wish this game was higher on my list. I wanted to, but because of the injuries to Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs, I just can't. At number 3, that's where I have Buccaneers against the 49ers, just because I still think Tampa is a solid team. Yes, San Francisco is coming off of their bye week, but they're having to go cross country. And I think Tampa's going to play with their hair on fire a little bit after that game against Kansas City. So that could be a very good game, I think. At number 2, that's where I have Steelers Commanders. And then at number 1, this is where you and I agree, Bengals Ravens Thursday Night Football.
So again, as I said, I think this week, really the 5 best games are the best 5 games. You and I, the only thing we disagree on is you think Dallas' season is over. I think Miami's season's over.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, we got to talk some college football, Josh, because I'll admit I really did not see any of this game. I caught highlights after the game. I was at a wedding and getting ready for a wedding. I had a lot to do. One of the reasons why I could not do the show last Tuesday. But the college football rankings are coming out here tonight in about 10 minutes. Along with obviously the first results of 20 million people waiting to find out what the hell is going to happen in our country. Smart on college football to say who cares. But nonetheless, Ohio State moves to number 3. Penn State drops to number 6. From everything I saw and heard, a little bit, it was a good game. Penn State got out early. Looked like Ohio State dominated the second half. But your takeaway as a Penn State fan?
I mean, it's a classic James Franklin game. Get out early, make Penn State fans think we can actually get over the hump, and then no. Was I celebrating when we got the when Penn State got the pick six and went up 10-0? Yes, but then I'm like, oh wait a minute, this is Ohio State. They'll come back, score a touchdown, and that's exactly what they did. Um, yeah, this the way this game played out was not surprising to me in the slightest. Ohio State and Michigan have both proven to be the boogeyman for James Franklin. As a Penn State fan, I want him fired because, I mean,
I mean, every single Ohio State Penn State game goes the same way. It literally does. Penn State gets up early. They can even take a lead going into the fourth quarter, and you're like, they're not going to win this game.
yep, 2016 was a complete and total fluke.
I would say the game that hurt me was 2018. The game that was at the shoe. Saquon Barkley returned the opening kick.
Oh, yeah. I remember that game.
And
Trust
then
me.
the year after that, I don't know if you remember, that was the night game in Napa Valley. On 4th and 5, James Franklin basically called a QB sneak.
Yeah. Well, it's Happy Valley. Napa Valley is over in California.
You're right. Thank you for correcting me. I misspoke.
Yeah. That was in the whiteout, which I still don't understand why this was a top 5 game and you put it at noon.
You and many other Penn State fans who were chanting F Big Noon kickoff. But I will say, the data does tell you that Big Noon kickoff is the most viewed window of college football this year.
Yeah, but I still like College Game Day better. And speaking of that, the whiteout game is against Washington, but you can only watch it if you have Peacock.
I mean, listen,
That's dumb.
it's the world we live in now. But college football is weird this year. Like we talked about it. I think the last time I was on the air with you, we had both thought that Texas was the best team in the country by a country mile, and Georgia demolished them.
Yep. And am I going to say Oregon's the best team? No, but they're probably going to come out as number one in these rankings.
Like honestly, I actually think they're in the conversation, obviously, for number one, because they do probably have the best record out of any unbeaten team by beating Ohio State. Like, I'm not going to take away from Texas. I'm not going to take away from Georgia or Ohio State or, even Penn State for that matter. Like, I think this is the most balanced college football season that we have ever had. And for all my criticisms of the 12-team playoff, and I still kind of wish it was 8 or 6. I think that would give a little even more urgency to these games instead of, like if you're a Penn State fan, Josh, my biggest criticism of college football now is like, oh, Ohio State beat us. Oh, well, we're still going to be in the CFP. I want that feeling from you as a fan to, oh my God, we lost this game. We may not make it.
Yeah, I totally get your criticism there. And it's completely valid also. It's like it does take away from the importance of these games at least a little bit. I'll be curious to see where Indiana is ranked.
How about Indiana? But by the way, Indiana and Iowa State, those are two teams that I did not expect at all to be in the top 10. And I like this comment here from Josh's dad, Dan. What's your take on name, image, likeness, and the zillions of dollars flowing to student athletes? Does it take away from the purity of college ball and athletics? Well, Dan,
No.
You probably know Josh's take on this, so I'll give you my take on it. When it first started, I was not a fan of name, image, likeness. I always thought kids go to college to go to college. They should not get paid, obviously, to play sports. But as we've seen and as time has gone on in college sports, I think this really is typical now for college football, somewhat college basketball, but college basketball has always been a mess, in my opinion, due to the one and done rule the sport has instituted.
Which college basketball is starting back up next week. We got Kentucky playing Michigan State and Kansas taking on Duke.
And what we've seen, in college football is I don't know if it takes away from the purity of college ball and athletics. I think what we have seen is this year specifically, we're starting to see the effects of NIL, and we're starting to see the effects of the transfer portal. Where these teams, it's almost like free agency right in the NFL, where they're getting these players for a year or two. But when you add players to one side, you're obviously taking away players from another side, and it has really created the most balanced college football that we have ever seen.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, I can't definitively tell you one team is going to win the national championship over another. I feel like in the years past, like, we kind of knew, for example, I think we all kind of knew Michigan was the best team in college football last season.
We knew there was 3 or 4 teams that could win the championship, and even going into the year, I thought there was 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6. You could push it. Now I think we're talking 5 or 6, and maybe you push it to 7 or 8.
And, and that's exactly my point. Like, go back a couple years. We knew Georgia was definitively the best team. And it was like, okay, they're gonna win. What's their record gonna be? Or when they get to the college football playoff? Yada yada yada. You get my point. Whereas this year, it's like you've got Georgia, you've got Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Clemson's even in the conversation. Texas. Okay,
And
maybe.
what we're also seeing too is we're seeing young teams, right, with a lot of transfer portal and a lot of transfer portal quarterbacks as well. Ohio State has one, Oregon has one. Um, you know, these teams, it's taking them more time to gel. And on the road, where college football environments are more insane than arguably any other sport, these teams are struggling to win games.
Oh yeah. Um, and on that note, like you got a major game going down this weekend in Death Valley. Basically, it's a playoff eliminator. Alabama at LSU, both
Yeah,
of these teams with 2 losses. Whoever loses this game, they can kiss their season goodbye.
that's a real rivalry with a lot of history.
Oh yeah. Um, so College Game Day is going to be there this weekend. It's going to be a big matchup, and yeah, strange things happen down in Death Valley.
So we go from the gridiron on the football field to swinging the sticks in baseball because the Los Angeles Dodgers have won the World Series for, in my mind, the first time since 1988. I don't count the 2020 season, 60 games, no travel, COVID, and all that. Shohei Ohtani, I mean, listen, he was hurt pretty much the whole series. They barely needed him. Um,
Yeah, because
I
Freddie Freeman happened. Good
so
Lord.
me and Jalen talked about this. This was the week that you were out, and he predicted Dodgers in 5 games. And I kind of felt like the Yankees after they beat Cleveland were kind of the team of destiny. But I also said when I watched both those teams, I thought the Yankees, I mean, I'm watching that World Series and it killed me because I could have made the argument Cleveland should have been up 3-2 in that series. If not, they should have been going to the World Series because I think we let 2 or 3 of those games get away just by unforced errors by Rocchio and obviously just missing the teeny bit on the location there because all the Yankees could do was score on home runs. They couldn't manufacture runs where the Dodgers could. And I thought the biggest story by the Los Angeles Dodgers was the fact that in Game 5, Jack Flaherty only won an inning and a third. Didn't matter. That team never gave up. Obviously, the 3 years by the Yankees in Game 5, they didn't finish. And I think the Dodgers were just meant to be. I mean, they were down 2-1 to their arch rival Padres in the NLDS. They never flinched, and history was made.
Yeah. So I'm going to say for the 7th time they're World Series champions because, like you, I don't count the 2020 World Series title because of the whole 60 games and COVID and being basically at a neutral site in Texas. So, but Freddie Freeman, I mean, talk about overcoming the odds. Like, he had an ankle injury, I think, if I'm not mistaken correctly.
Yeah, he did.
And they intentionally walk Mookie to get to Freddie. And what does he do? Bam! walk-off grand slam. And then,
Gibby Meet Freddy.
huh?
Gibby Meet Freddy, the iconic call by Joe
Oh,
Davis.
yeah. Um,
Reminiscent of course, Kirk Gibson, game one.
yep.
Then game two, they took care of the Yankees, and then you know the Dodgers they beat up on the Yankees. They got to them early, and I thought the biggest story of the series really was the Yankees' one advantage in the series was their starting pitching. And the Dodgers, obviously, they used a bullpen game in game four. And I got to tell you something, Josh. When the Yankees went up 5-0 in game five, I said, oh, not only are we going to go to a game six, I thought we were going to a game seven. And I thought there was real momentum on the Yankees side until that fifth inning happened. Because as we now know in baseball, which I think is the weirdest stat I probably have ever heard in the history of stats, that in a 3-0 series lead in the World Series, no team in MLB history had ever gotten to a game six. That's insane to me.
Yeah. It kind of makes sense, though, because once you're up 3-0, it feels like it's basically over. Like, we saw the 0-4 Red Sox come back from down 0-3. I get that. But, like,
Here's what's crazy though in baseball. This is why I'll push back a little bit. You know what the old saying is? Momentum is only as good as your next day starter.
right. I understand that. Which I bet you Major League Baseball is not happy that this World Series only went 5 games.
Well,
Do you do you
I
realize that?
agree, but also game five got a huge number.
Oh, I understand that, but let me. I don't think we haven't had a Game 7 in a World Series since 2019. If I'm doing that, remembering
Did the
correctly.
2021 go seven? No, that went six, right? Yeah, that went six.
Yeah, that went 6.
So yeah, 2019, you're right.
Yep. Like, Major League Baseball has to be like, what do we have to do to get a 7-game series?
Boy, I would love it if the Dodgers could go get Juan Soto. And I mean, just steal him for the New York Yankees because the Yankees, like, they're a good team, but I already mentioned it. Like, this is not me being a homer. I really thought Cleveland was like two pitches and a bad air and uncharacteristic error away from winning the series. Like, the Yankees won that series in five. Cleveland could have easily been up 3-2 going back to New York.
Would the Guardians have beaten the Dodgers in the World Series?
My guess would be no, but I don't know. I mean, we were playing so well. We held on right there with the Yankees. I mean, you don't know matchups and stuff depending.
Right. Which the Yankees are just the boogeyman for the Guardians. It's that simple.
2017, 2020,
2022.
2022, 2024.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So let's transition a little bit to the hardwood because Judge and I went back and forth on this, and I understand Josh's thoughts on it, right? You know, Josh does not really want to make predictions now that the NBA season has already started. But I said, you know, John's been my co-host here on Championship Rings. Obviously, the majority of the time here over the 2 years he's been doing this show. And I did not think it was fair for Josh not to give any predictions at all for the NBA season. And I do think that, you know, we are only 8 games in. There are some surprises already, including the fact there's only 2 teams above 500 in the Eastern Conference. And one of them is our Cleveland Cavaliers. Who would have thought? And they're undefeated, by the way, along with the Oklahoma City Thunder. But I wanted to throw my picks up on the screen. And, you know, again, let's disregard these first 8 games if you can. Take a look at this. Seeds 1 through 8, and then I'll give you what I had for my conference final and NBA final. Where do you severely take issue with my East?
Milwaukee at 1. What? I'm sorry. Did Boston just? Did you just forget about the defending champs? Why?
So Jay would actually agree with me on this, but I was shocked. I thought he was going to roast me on it too. My biggest thought on that was I thought Boston, after winning the championship, did not think they were going to have the sense of urgency in the regular season. And I thought, for whatever reason, and I look stupid now for it, and I'll already admit it, I thought Giannis and Dame were coming back on a revenge tour.
No, just no. Um, people are already talking about Giannis went out of Milwaukee.
I saw that again. There's a reason why I thought Boston would take the regular season a little bit more slowly. I didn't, the Cavs, their offense is way better than I thought it was going to be. I did not know how much change there was going to be with Kenny Atkinson. So there's a reason why I put them at 6 because I liked Orlando and Indiana projecting up more than Cleveland at the beginning of the year. Obviously, thankfully for that, I'm wrong. But that's my reasoning behind it. Philadelphia, I threw in there in Miami because they're two talented teams, but I don't trust either one of them, especially
Yeah,
Philly.
I I get what you're saying with Indiana. I'd put them a little lower. I'd still keep them in the top 6 though. I I probably would flip Indiana and Cleveland. Because I don't think the Cavs are going to finish 1 or 2. I know we've gotten out to an 8-0 start. I think eventually we will fall back a little bit. I could see our first loss if we get past Wednesday's game against New Orleans. I think our first loss could be on Friday when Steph comes to town. Um, Especially because that's the first night of a back-to-back because we play Brooklyn on Saturday and then play Chicago, Philly, Chicago, and then I think it's Charlotte.
By the way, is Steph even bad? Because his
Yeah,
ankle's been hurt. I didn't think he
yeah,
was playing.
yep. He came back last night against
Okay.
Washington. So he'll most likely be in the game tomorrow against Boston, which we're going to get to that game shortly because we definitely have to talk about that. But in terms of who you have making the playoffs, I don't disagree. I would just have Boston at 1. I don't think New York ends up as the 2 seed. I I question while I like what they did in terms of Cat and Mikal Bridges offensively, I think they lost a little bit defensively. So in terms of Randall and DiVincenzo, sure DiVincenzo isn't as much of a two-way player, but he still brought that defensive mentality, I would say. So I think that's going to be a big loss for New York. Um, yeah. So I would say probably Boston at 1. I'm gonna go. I want to put Orlando 2, but I can't because of the Banchero injury. So I'll keep New York at 2. I'll put Cleveland at 3. I'll put Milwaukee 4, Indiana 5, or I'll say Philadelphia at 6, in Orlando 7, Miami 8.
Okay, but you agree with the 8 teams I have up there. You wouldn't swap any of them out.
No, I don't. Like, if there's going to be a team that could maybe sneak in there, I don't know. Who's a team outside of these
Like
8?
maybe Chicago, maybe.
Yeah, but
Again, I didn't do the play-in tournament. You know my feelings on the play-in tournament. I hate it. I can't stand it. So I just did the regular 8 seeds.
that's fine.
Like Chicago's a play-in tournament team to me. So
Like, I look at your 8 teams, I'm like, who can really challenge these 8? Like, Charlotte? No. Brooklyn? No.
Detroit, no.
Detroit, I think, is going to be a little bit better than people think, but not enough to challenge any of these 8. I like the pieces the Pistons have, though, with Jaden Ivey and Kate Cunningham. But
okay. So I will tell you real quick before we go to the West. My Eastern Conference Final with a 3-seed Boston Celtic team hosting the 5-seed Orlando Magic. And I had Boston getting out of the East. And for the record, I had Miami for the second straight year upsetting Milwaukee in the first round.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you about Orlando, but just because of the Banchero injury, it's going to be hard for them to overcome that because they're.
Well, he's going to be back by Christmas. I mean, you act like he's out for the whole year.
No, I know, but like That's a long time for them.
6 weeks. I mean, if they can go 500 ball, they'll be okay in what seems to be a down east so far.
Yeah. Um,
Okay, let's flip to the West
go because
because
this is super interesting.
okay, so you can make an argument for other
Ooh.
teams in the West. I I mean, I was like, I could choose 10 other teams basically here.
Yeah.
Um, that was just sort of my gut feeling on. I went with younger teams more so than veteran teams. Like I couldn't leave LeBron completely out. I didn't really want to leave Phoenix completely out with their talent. Um, like I don't have New Orleans on there. You can make an argument for. I don't have Sacramento on there. You can make an argument for. I will not hear the Golden State argument. I think Golden State's done. I think the dynasty is over. Like
Even with the strong start they're off to with
yeah, they
one
may be the
loss.
10 seed. I don't think that they're that good at all. I I
Okay.
really don't.
So you still think Denver's going to be a solid team?
Boy, Russell Westbrook had me questioning that. But yeah, like they're not as good as I thought they were going to be. I was on here telling you they're going to be the next dynasty, and I'm completely off that train. Um, they're not going to be the Denver that I thought they should be. And part of that is front office moves and then losing bench pieces and Jamal Murray not knowing if he's going to be healthy for the whole year. I will say this. I think people are forgetting about the Memphis Grizzlies. I think Zach Edey is going to have a big year along with John Moran. I think people forgot Memphis was the 2 seed a couple years ago. And I think Houston is going to be like the Oklahoma City of this year, who we all, everybody thought was going to be a playing team. And then all of a sudden they rose up to be one of the top seeds. I think the Rockets are that team this year. Jalen Green, Sengun, Ime Udoka, the former Celtics coach, their head coach. I really like what they're doing there in Houston.
Yeah. I think you have Houston just a little high right now. I would definitely keep them in the top 6, but for right now, I would flip Houston and Dallas. I I would still put, keep Houston in that top 6 though. I would put OKC at 1, like you have it. I would have. I agree with your top 2. Then at number 3, I would go Dallas. At number 4, that's where I'm going to. At number 4, that's where I'm putting Houston. 5, no. Number 3, I'm going Dallas. Number 4, I'm going Houston. 5, Denver. 6, Memphis.
Can I just say I love watching you do this in real time and you using your brain to actually think. It's actually a fun. Um, I threw the Lakers in there just because it's LeBron and AD. Like, I think they can make the playoffs. I don't think they beat Oklahoma City or a Minnesota in a first round matchup, but that's the way it would go. But I just put them in there because I don't buy the Clippers at all. I think the Clippers are going towards a total rebuild, by the way. Kawhi Leonard's already not playing. They don't got Paul George anymore. Um, I think that franchise is just, a disaster, quite frankly. And there's a reason why Paul George left.
Yeah.
So,
Um.
but like, okay, so in the West, I kind of had the complete opposite of the East. I actually went chalk in the West. I had Oklahoma City and Minnesota in the Western Conference Finals. I think that series could go 7, and I will give the edge to who I believe will be this year's regular season MVP, which will be SGA out of Oklahoma City.
Who should have won MVP last season, but
So I have Oklahoma City and Boston in the finals, and I did pick Oklahoma City to win their first championship in franchise history for Boston to not repeat.
that would be a fantastic NBA Finals. Um, and I could definitely see it happening without a doubt. Um, I would also go with Oklahoma City just because I don't know if Minnesota has enough shooting around the their new big man set of Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert. I know they got Dante DiVincenzo as part of that trade, but I just don't know if they have enough shooters to surround Anthony Edwards, Julius Randle, and Rudy Gobert.
Is
That's
Naz Reid going to be that guy again that can't miss a shot?
right. That's my biggest question. Um, so I would go with Oklahoma City. In terms of the East, I mean, as until somebody knocks them off, it has to be the Celtics, I feel like.
So all three of us had, including Jalen, had an Oklahoma City Boston finals.
Which I want to say Oklahoma City, but because I'm a little bit spiteful about them still coming, stealing Seattle, I'm going to say the Boston Celtics repeat.
And out of the three of us, you were the only one that picked Boston. And by the way, Boston still has those eight great shooters. That I mean, I love Boston's philosophy, and Cleveland's starting to do it, which is why I think the Cavs might actually be for real. We're going to shoot threes and layups, and we're going to shoot more threes than twos because we can make more threes than you can.
Yes.
Is that not the new NBA? I mean, nobody could beat when Porzingis was hot. Boston was unbeatable. You couldn't beat him.
No. So Dallas is interesting. I want to talk about the Mavericks for just a second.
So the reason why I had them at 6,
Okay, I want to hear this.
I don't think Kyrie and Luka is sustainable. I don't think that is a regular season 82 game. They remind me of the Lakers. Remember when the Lakers made all those trades at the deadline and they were a 7 seed? They ended up going to the Western Conference Finals and getting beat by Denver. And everybody was like, last year, yeah, the Lakers are going to come back. And then they just fall back down to earth.
Yes.
That's what I think Dallas is going to do.
I can understand your philosophy on that. The only reason I'm giving Dallas the edge over Houston right now is because while I understand what you're saying about the Rockets maybe being this year's version of the Oklahoma City Thunder, I still think the Rockets are like a year or two away just because they're still a very young team.
Well, so was Oklahoma City's the youngest team in basketball, and they were the 1 seed last year, and they still are.
Yeah. I would say Oklahoma City, yes, they're a young team, but they play like veterans, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I could make the same case about Houston, though.
Oklahoma City has that playoff experience now. Houston doesn't, so that's why I would give them the edge. And that's part of the reason why I would give Dallas the edge, because like Kyrie and Luka, they have that year under their belts of playing with Derek Lively and some of the other guys, and they felt like Clay was the missing piece. I get it. He's not the same player he was prior to the surgeries. I understand that. But still, you want him to stand out there and just go bing, bing. He can do that.
I just don't think in a consistent rate anymore.
And I can understand your philosophy on that. I totally can.
All right, let's get into it because you wanted to talk about it. Celtics, Warriors tomorrow.
Yes, both teams come into this game with one loss, which that adds a lot to it. This is a rematch of the 2022 NBA Finals where the Celtics were up 2-1, and then Golden State came back to win the series. But you know the story everybody's going to be talking about, which Jason Tatum seems to kind of be brushing it off. But do you remember what happened during the Paris Olympics? Jason Tatum basically got benched.
Yes.
And so you don't think Jason Tatum has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder coming into this game tomorrow? Like, okay, I'm going to show Steve Kerr that he should have played me.
I don't think Jason Tatum has a chip on any shoulder. I don't think Jason Tatum has that dog in him.
Is that part of the reason why, going back to your predictions for a second, is that part of the reason why you have Boston as the 3 seed?
No, it's just I didn't think Boston would care about how have the regular season games the way they did last year because they already won their title.
See, that's where I disagree with you a little bit because a lot of people are saying the Celtics got an easy road to the finals.
I mean, they did. Let's be honest. They did.
I'm not disagreeing, but like, I feel like the Celtics are going to use that as adversity, or not
Well,
adversity.
they
What?
may just be too talented. I mean, as much as you like Indiana and I like Orlando, Boston's got more talent than them. Listen, I think Jalen Brown's got the dog in him. I think Drew Holiday's got the dog in him. I think they just got a lot of good players. I think in Golden State, congratulations. They got off to a good start. They're still a very old basketball team. And Steph Curry's already injured. I get he just came back, but we're, 6, 7, 8 games into the year already. He's already dealing with injuries, and he's not getting any older. And Draymond Green cannot score the ball. And Pods, I don't think, is, the second coming of Klay Thompson yet. I think this is sort of a, early in the year surprise factor of Golden State. Like, don't take us lightly, but I think they're going to slowly regress back down to the mean. Um, Again, if they win tomorrow night or Boston wins, you know how I feel about these November NBA games. I don't think they have a lot of stake because I think teams change significantly from the first part of the year to the next part of the season. I really think the way you could tell if an NBA team is for real or not, if Golden State is still in that number one-ish position on Christmas Day, I will sit here and say they are for real. I always thought that is your benchmark to see where your team really is at.
I understand that, but again, like you've kind of written Golden State off. A lot of people have written Golden State off. If they can go into Boston and win without Klay Thompson, with Steph Curry who has just come back from injury, like you mentioned, I won't say that's a statement win, but I would say it's a big win early in the season.
Well, I can tell you this: at their best, in my opinion, at their very best, they will not be better than Oklahoma City. They will
No,
not be better than Minnesota. I don't think they will be better than Houston because I think Houston would just outrun their old asses to the ground, like we saw Houston do at the end of last year. Remember when Houston almost caught him in the play-in tournament?
yes, I do.
So there's that. And I don't think they'd be better than Denver. And if Memphis is as good as I think, I don't know if they're better than Memphis or Dallas. So I think at best they're a playing team.
Oh, I'm not saying the Warriors are going to be a playoff team. That's not what I'm trying to insinuate at all. Because I do think those six teams you mentioned are probably going to be the ones that go straight to the playoffs. But by the same token, this is Steph Curry. Like we've seen him.
In my mind, when you're no longer a championship team, the dynasty's over. At the end of 2022, when they won the title, they should have blew it up there. The dynasty should have been over. They will never trade Steph, I don't think, because he is Golden State. Unless obviously he requests the trade, which I don't think he do. Um, but unless they get a Giannis or somebody like that, the dynasty's over.
Yes, I would agree with you on that. And by the way, next week I'm I'll have to let you know if I'm doing the show or not. I'm maybe going to a store party. I'll let you know. But Klay Thompson is making his return to the Bay Area for the first time with
Well,
the tap.
we will keep that in mind. We do have to wrap it up for tonight. Appreciate everybody stopping by tonight on a lively championship ranks. Josh, I told you we didn't talk for like 2, 3 weeks a lot. We did text back and forth on other stuff, but not a lot on sports. And so we came in tonight a little bit blind on each other's takes, and I think it worked out better than maybe both of us expected.
Yeah, maybe not as he is I thought it would be. I'll give you that.
But that was a great show. Thank you guys so much. As always, make sure to check us out on all of our social media feeds. We will be back next week. Polls are about to close here in Ohio, so if by chance you're watching live, you got 7 minutes to get in line. Make sure you have a plan to vote. And we'll be back next week on Championship Rings. Did it?